It was a chilly evening in a small, bustling town. The streets were alive with the sounds of cars honking, people chatting, and the occasional bark of a stray dog. Among the crowd was a little girl, no older than 8, walking home with her mother. She had a bright pink backpack slung over her shoulders and a curious look in her eyes as she took in the world around her. As they passed by a dimly lit alley, the girl noticed a man sitting on the ground, leaning against a wall. He looked tired, his clothes worn and tattered, and his face etched with lines of hardship. In front of him was a small cardboard sign that read, "Hungry. Anything helps." The girl stopped in her tracks, tugging at her mother's hand. "Mom, can we help him?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with concern. Her mother hesitated, glancing at the man and then at her daughter. She knew they didn't have much to spare, but the look in her daughter's eyes was impossible to ignore. "We can share our dinner," the little girl suggested, already unzipping her backpack. She pulled out a small lunchbox containing a sandwich and an apple that she had saved from school. Her mother smiled, touched by her daughter's kindness. Together, they walked over to the man. The man looked up, surprised, as the little girl held out the food to him. "Here, this is for you," she said with a smile. The man's eyes widened, and for a moment, he seemed at a loss for words. Slowly, he reached out and took the lunchbox, his hands trembling slightly. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. The little girl simply nodded and waved before skipping back to her mother, who gave her a proud hug. The man watched them walk away, clutching the lunchbox tightly, as if it were the most precious thing he had ever received. That night, as the little girl lay in bed, she thought about the man and hoped he was okay. She didn't know his story, but she felt happy that she could help, even in a small way. What she didn't know was that her simple act of kindness would soon change everything. The next morning, the little girl and her mother were having breakfast when there was a knock at the door. The girl's mother opened it to find 2 police officers standing outside. Her heart skipped a beat. What could they possibly want? "Good morning, ma'am," one of the officers said politely. "We're here to speak with you and your daughter about an incident that happened yesterday." The little girl's mother was confused but invited the officers inside. The little girl, curious and a little nervous, peeked out from behind her mother. The officers smiled warmly at her, trying to put her at ease. "We received a report about a kind gesture your daughter made last night," the other officer explained. "She gave food to a homeless man in the alley near Main Street, correct?" The mother nodded, still unsure where this was going. "Yes, that's right. She wanted to help him." The officers exchanged a glance before continuing. "Well, that man was someone we've been looking for. He's been missing for over a year, and his family has been searching for him. Thanks to your daughter's kindness, we were able to locate him and reunite him with his loved ones." The little girl's eyes widened in surprise. She had no idea that her small act of kindness could have such a big impact. Her mother hugged her tightly, tears welling up in her eyes. The officers thanked them both and left, but the story was far from over. The homeless man, whose name was revealed to be John, had once been a successful carpenter with a loving family. But a series of unfortunate events, losing his job, the death of his wife, and mounting debts, had left him broken and homeless. Overwhelmed by grief and shame, he had drifted from town to town, eventually ending up in the little girl's neighborhood. When the little girl gave him the food, it was the first act of genuine kindness he had experienced in a long time. That night, as he ate the sandwich and apple, he felt a glimmer of hope. The next morning, he decided to seek help at a nearby shelter, where the staff recognized him from a missing persons report and contacted the police. John's family had never given up hope of finding him. His daughter, now a young woman, had spent months searching for him, putting up posters and reaching out to shelters. When the police called to say they had found him, she rushed to the shelter, tears streaming down her face. The reunion was emotional. John and his daughter hugged tightly, both crying as they held each other for the first time in over a year. John apologized for leaving, and his daughter forgave him, just grateful to have him back. She promised to help him get back on his feet, and for the first time in a long time, John felt like he had a chance at a new beginning. News of the little girl's kindness and John's reunion with his family spread quickly through the town. People were inspired by the story, and it sparked a wave of generosity. Donations poured into local shelters, and volunteers signed up to help the homeless in the community. The little girl became a local hero, though she didn't fully understand why everyone was making such a big deal about what she had done. To her, it was just a simple act of kindness. But her actions reminded everyone that even the smallest gestures can have a profound impact. Her school held a special assembly to honor her, and she was given a certificate of kindness. The mayor even invited her and her mother to a town meeting, where she was thanked for her compassion and bravery. The little girl shyly accepted the praise, still unsure why everyone was so impressed. Meanwhile, John and his daughter worked on rebuilding their relationship. With the help of the community, John found a job and a small apartment. He started attending counseling sessions to deal with his grief and guilt, and slowly but surely, he began to heal. One day, John asked the police officers if they could help him find the little girl who had changed his life. He wanted to thank her in person. The officers were happy to arrange a meeting, and soon, John and his daughter were standing on the little girl's doorstep. When the door opened, the little girl's eyes lit up with recognition. "You're the man from the alley," she exclaimed. John smiled and nodded, kneeling down to her level. "Yes, I am," he said softly. "And I wanted to thank you for what you did. You didn't just give me food, you gave me hope. Because of you, I'm back with my family, and I have a second chance at life." The little girl beamed, her heart swelling with pride. "I'm so happy for you," she said, giving him a hug. John's daughter thanked her as well, tears in her eyes. From that day on, John and the little girl became friends. He would often visit her family, bringing small handmade gifts as tokens of his gratitude. The little girl's mother was touched by the bond they shared, and she was proud of her daughter for making such a difference in someone's life. The story of the little girl and John became a lesson for the entire town. It reminded people that kindness knows no boundaries and that even the smallest acts of compassion can change lives. Schools started incorporating lessons on empathy and community service, and local organizations worked together to support the homeless. The little girl's mother often told her how proud she was, but she also reminded her that kindness should come from the heart, not for recognition or praise. The little girl understood, and she continued to look for ways to help others, whether it was sharing her lunch or simply offering a smile to someone in need. John, too, became an advocate for the homeless, sharing his story to raise awareness and encourage others to lend a helping hand. He and his daughter volunteered at shelters, and he used his carpentry skills to build furniture for those in need. As time went on, the town became a more compassionate and united community. The little girl grew up, but she never forgot the lesson she had learned that chilly evening. She continued to spread kindness wherever she went, inspiring others to do the same. John's life continued to improve, and he eventually became a mentor for others who were struggling. He often spoke about the little girl who had saved him, calling her his angel. His daughter was grateful to have her father back, and they worked together to create a foundation to help the homeless. The little girl's act of kindness had started a chain reaction that touched countless lives. It showed that no matter how small or insignificant an action may seem, it has the power to create ripples of change. Years later, the little girl, now a young woman, returned to her hometown after finishing college. She was greeted with warmth and admiration, as her story had become a legend in the town. She visited John, who was now a respected member of the community, and they reminisced about the day that had changed both of their lives. The town had continued to thrive, with kindness and compassion at its core. The little girl's story was taught in schools, and her legacy lived on in the hearts of everyone who had been touched by it. As she walked through the streets, she noticed a young girl helping an elderly woman cross the road. She smiled, knowing that the spirit of kindness she had sparked so many years ago was still alive and well. The little girl's story was a reminder that even in a world that can sometimes feel cold and indifferent, there is always room for warmth and love. And sometimes, all it takes is one small act of kindness to light the way. The next morning, the little girl and her mother were sitting at their small kitchen table, enjoying a simple breakfast of toast and jam. The sun streamed through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the room. The little girl was humming a tune, her feet swinging under the table, when there was a sudden knock at the door. Her mother looked up, surprised. They weren't expecting anyone. She wiped her hands on a towel and walked to the door, peeking through the peephole. Standing outside were two police officers, their uniforms crisp and their expressions serious but not unkind. The little girl's mother opened the door, her heart pounding slightly. "Good morning, officers. Is everything all right?" "Good morning, ma'am," one of the officers said politely. "We're here to speak with you and your daughter about an incident that happened yesterday." The little girl, hearing this, popped her head around her mother's side, her eyes wide with curiosity. She had never been this close to a police officer before, and she couldn't help but stare at their shiny badges and belts filled with gadgets. "An incident?" her mother asked, her voice tinged with worry. "What kind of incident?" The officers exchanged a quick glance before the second one spoke. "We received a report about a kind gesture your daughter made last night. She gave food to a homeless man in the alley near Main Street, correct?" The little girl's mother relaxed slightly, nodding. "Yes, that's right. She wanted to help him. Is there a problem?" "Not at all," the first officer said with a reassuring smile. "In fact, it's quite the opposite. That man was someone we've been looking for. He's been missing for over a year, and his family has been searching for him. Thanks to your daughter's kindness, we were able to locate him and reunite him with his loved ones." The little girl's eyes widened in surprise. She had no idea that her small act of kindness could have such a big impact. Her mother knelt down beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Do you hear that, sweetheart? Because of what you did, that man is back with his family." The little girl blinked, processing the information. "Is he okay now?" she asked softly. The officers smiled. "He's doing much better, thanks to you," one of them said. "You did a very good thing." The little girl's mother hugged her tightly, tears welling up in her eyes. She was so proud of her daughter, but she was also overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events. The officers thanked them both and left, but the story was far from over. As the door closed behind the officers, the little girl turned to her mother. "Mom, do you think he's happy now?" Her mother smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "I think he's very happy, thanks to you. You reminded him that there are still good people in the world." The little girl thought about this for a moment, then nodded. "I hope he gets to eat lots of food now." Her mother laughed softly, pulling her into another hug. "I'm sure he will, sweetheart. And it's all because of you." Later that day, the little girl's mother called her sister to share the news. "You won't believe what happened," she said, her voice filled with excitement. She recounted the story, from the little girl's act of kindness to the police officer's visit. Her sister listened in awe, amazed by the ripple effect of such a simple gesture. "That's incredible," her sister said. "Your daughter is a hero." "She is," the little girl's mother agreed, her heart swelling with pride. "But you know what's even more amazing? She didn't do it for recognition or praise. She did it because it was the right thing to do." Meanwhile, the story began to spread through the town. The police officers shared it with their colleagues, who shared it with their families. Soon, it was the talk of the neighborhood. People were inspired by the little girl's kindness and the way it had brought a family back together. At the local grocery store, the cashier mentioned it to a customer. "Did you hear about the little girl who helped that homeless man?" she asked. "It's such a heartwarming story." The customer nodded, smiling. "I did. It's amazing how one small act of kindness can make such a big difference." At the park, a group of parents chatted about it while their children played. "It just goes to show," one of them said, "that we should always teach our kids to be kind. You never know how much it might mean to someone." Back at home, the little girl's mother sat down with her to talk about what had happened. "I'm so proud of you," she said, holding her daughter's hands. "But I also want you to know that kindness isn't about getting recognition or making headlines. It's about doing what's right, even when no one is watching." The little girl nodded, her expression serious. "I know, Mom. I just wanted to help him because he looked hungry." Her mother smiled, her heart full. "And that's exactly why you're so special. You have a kind heart, and that's the most important thing in the world." As the day turned into evening, the little girl lay in bed, thinking about the man she had helped. She wondered if he was eating dinner with his family, laughing and talking like they did at their table. The thought made her smile, and she drifted off to sleep, her heart light and happy. What she didn't know was that her story was just beginning to reach even more people. The next day, a local journalist would show up at their door, wanting to share her story with the world. But for now, the little girl slept peacefully, unaware of the impact she had already made. The homeless man, whose name was revealed to be John, had once been a successful carpenter with a loving family. He had a wife who adored him, a daughter who looked up to him, and a home filled with laughter and warmth. But life, as it often does, took an unexpected turn. It started with the loss of his job. The company he had worked for over a decade went bankrupt, and John found himself unemployed. He searched for work tirelessly, but opportunities were scarce, and the bills began to pile up. Then, tragedy struck. His wife fell ill, and despite their best efforts, she passed away, leaving John and their young daughter devastated. Overwhelmed by grief and the weight of his responsibilities, John struggled to keep things together. He tried to be strong for his daughter, but the pain was too much to bear. He fell into a deep depression, and before long, he lost their home. With nowhere else to go, he and his daughter moved into a small, run-down apartment, but even that didn't last. Unable to pay the rent, they were evicted. John's daughter went to live with relatives, but John, consumed by guilt and shame, couldn't bring himself to ask for help. He felt like a failure, unable to provide for his family or keep his life together. One day, he simply walked away, leaving everything behind. He drifted from town to town, sleeping on park benches, in alleyways, and under bridges. He became invisible, just another face in the crowd of the homeless. For over a year, John lived this way, cut off from the world and from the people who loved him. His daughter, now a young woman, never stopped looking for him. She put up posters, reached out to shelters, and even started a social media campaign to find her father. But as the months passed, hope began to fade. Then, one chilly evening, everything changed. John was sitting in an alley, his stomach growling with hunger, when a little girl approached him. The story of the little girl's kindness and John's reunion with his family spread like wildfire through the town. It started with the police officers who had visited the little girl's home. They shared the story with their colleagues, who shared it with their families. Soon, it was the talk of the neighborhood, and then the entire town. At the local coffee shop, customers chatted about it over their morning cups of coffee. "Did you hear about the little girl who helped that homeless man?" one woman asked her friend. "It's such a heartwarming story." Her friend nodded, stirring her latte. "I did. It's amazing how one small act of kindness can make such a big difference. It makes you think, doesn't it?" At the park, a group of parents watched their children play while discussing the story. "It just goes to show," one of them said, "that we should always teach our kids to be kind. You never know how much it might mean to someone. Even the local news picked up the story. A journalist reached out to the little girl's mother, asking if she and her daughter would be willing to share their experience. At first, the mother hesitated. She wanted to protect her daughter's privacy, but she also saw an opportunity to spread a message of kindness and compassion. "What do you think, sweetheart?" she asked her daughter. "Would you like to talk to the reporter about what happened?" The little girl thought about it for a moment, then nodded. If it helps other people, then yes. The next day, the journalist arrived at their home with a camera crew. The little girl sat on the couch, her feet dangling above the floor, as the reporter asked her questions. "What made you want to help the man in the alley?" the reporter asked. The little girl shrugged, her voice soft but sincere. "He looked hungry, and I had food. I just wanted to help." Her mother smiled, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "She has always had a kind heart," she said. "We didn't know it would lead to something so big, but we're proud of her." The reporter also spoke to John and his daughter, who shared their side of the story. "I had lost all hope," John said, his voice filled with emotion. "But that little girl reminded me that there are still good people in the world. Because of her, I'm back with my family, and I have a second chance at life." His daughter nodded, tears in her eyes. "We're so grateful to her. She didn't just help my dad, she brought our family back together." When the story aired on the local news that evening, it touched the hearts of everyone who watched it. People were inspired by the little girl's kindness and the way it had brought a family back together. Donations poured into local shelters, and volunteers signed up to help the homeless in the community. At the little girl's school, her classmates and teachers were amazed by what she had done. The principal held a special assembly to honor her. One afternoon, as the little girl and her mother were baking cookies together, there was another knock at the door. This time, it wasn't a reporter or a police officer. It was John, the man the little girl had helped, standing there with his daughter. He looked different now, clean-shaven, wearing neat clothes, and with a sparkle in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The little girl's mother opened the door, surprised but happy to see him. "John! What a nice surprise. Please, come in." John smiled nervously, holding a small, handmade wooden box in his hands. "Thank you. I hope we're not intruding. I wanted to thank your daughter in person." The little girl peeked out from behind her mother, her eyes lighting up when she saw John. "You're the man from the alley," she exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. John chuckled, kneeling down to her level. "Yes, I am. And I wanted to say thank you for what you did. You didn't just give me food that night, you gave me hope. Because of you, I'm back with my family, and I have a second chance at life." He held out the wooden box, which he had carved himself. "I made this for you. It's not much, but I wanted to show my gratitude." The little girl took the box, running her fingers over the intricate carvings of flowers and hearts. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice soft with wonder. "Thank you." John's daughter stepped forward, her eyes glistening with tears. "We're so grateful to you," she said. "You brought my dad back to me. I don't know how to thank you enough." The little girl looked up at her, smiling shyly. "I'm just happy you're together again." From that day on, John and his daughter became regular visitors to the little girl's home. They would come over for dinner, sharing stories and laughter around the table. John's daughter and the little girl quickly became friends, bonding over their shared love of art and storytelling. They would spend hours drawing pictures and making up stories, their imaginations running wild. John, meanwhile, found a kindred spirit in the little girl's mother. They would sit in the kitchen, sipping tea and talking about life, loss, and the power of second chances. John shared his struggles openly, and the little girl's mother listened with empathy and understanding. She admired his resilience and his determination to rebuild his life. One evening, as they sat together, John turned to her. "You've done an amazing job raising your daughter," he said. "She's kind, compassionate, and wise beyond her years. You should be proud." The little girl's mother smiled, her eyes misty. "Thank you, John. I am proud of her. But I also think kindness is something we're all born with. Sometimes, we just need a little reminder to let it shine." As the weeks passed, John continued to rebuild his life. He found a job at a local woodworking shop, where his skills were appreciated and valued. He started saving money, with the goal of one day opening his own small carpentry business. His daughter supported him every step of the way, cheering him on and reminding him of how far he had come. The little girl, meanwhile, continued to spread kindness in her own small ways. She would share her lunch with a classmate who forgot theirs, help an elderly neighbor carry groceries, or simply offer a smile to someone who looked like they needed it. Her actions inspired her classmates, who started their own kindness club at school, dedicated to doing good deeds and helping others. One day, the little girl came home from school, her face glowing with excitement. "Mom, guess what?" she said, bouncing on her toes. "We're going to do a kindness project at school. We're going to make care packages for people who don't have homes." Her mother smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "That's a wonderful idea, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." The little girl beamed. "Can John help us? He knows what people might need." Her mother nodded. "I think that's a great idea. Let's ask him." When John heard about the project, he was more than happy to help. He and his daughter joined the little girl and her classmates, sharing his experiences and offering suggestions for what to include in the care packages. They filled them with essentials like socks, toiletries, and non-perishable food, as well as small notes of encouragement written by the students. On the day they handed out the care packages, the little girl stood beside John, watching as people's faces lit up with gratitude. She felt a warmth in her heart, knowing that she was making a difference, just like she had done that chilly evening in the alley. As they packed up to leave, John placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're changing lives, you know that," he said, his voice filled with pride. The little girl looked up at him, her eyes shining. "I'm just doing what feels right." John smiled. "And that's what makes you so special." The little girl's kindness project at school was a huge success. The care packages they had put together were distributed to people in need, and the students felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. But the project didn't end there. Inspired by the little girl's actions, the school decided to make kindness a central part of its curriculum. The principal announced a new initiative called Kindness Matters, which encouraged students to perform acts of kindness both big and small. Each week, students would share stories of how they had helped others, and the most impactful acts would be recognized during a special assembly. The little girl's story was often mentioned as an example of how one small act could make a big difference. One day, during a class discussion about kindness, the little girl's teacher asked her to share her thoughts. "What does kindness mean to you?" the teacher asked. The little girl thought for a moment, then smiled. "Kindness is when you help someone without expecting anything in return. It's about making someone's day a little better, even if it's just with a smile or a kind word." Her classmates nodded, inspired by her words. One boy raised his hand. "But what if someone isn't nice to you? Should you still be kind to them?" The little girl's teacher smiled, encouraging her to answer. She thought for a moment, then said, "I think being kind is even more important when someone isn't nice to you. Maybe they're having a bad day, and your kindness could help them feel better." The class erupted into applause, and the little girl's teacher gave her a proud smile. "Well said," she remarked. "Kindness is a choice we make, no matter what." Meanwhile, John's life continued to improve. He had started taking small carpentry commissions, building furniture and decorative items for people in the community. His work was in high demand, and he began saving money to open his own workshop. His daughter was his biggest supporter, helping him with designs and marketing. One evening, as they sat together in their small apartment, John's daughter turned to him. "Dad, do you remember when we first found you? I was so scared that we'd never see you again." John nodded, his eyes filled with emotion. "I remember. And I'm so sorry for putting you through that. But I'm grateful every day that I have a second chance to be your dad." His daughter smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I'm grateful too. And I'm proud of you, Dad. You've come so far." John hugged her tightly, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He knew he still had a long way to go, but he was determined to make the most of his second chance. The little girl's story had also inspired other families in the community. One day, a neighbor stopped by her house with her young son. "I just wanted to thank you," the neighbor said to the little girl's mother. "Your daughter's kindness has inspired my son to be more thoughtful. He started helping out around the house and even shared his toys with a friend who didn't have any." The little girl's mother smiled, feeling a swell of pride. "That's wonderful to hear. Kindness really does have a way of spreading, doesn't it?" The neighbor nodded. "It does. And it's all thanks to your daughter." As the weeks went by, the little girl continued to find new ways to help others. She started a small garden in her backyard, growing vegetables that she donated to a local food bank. She also volunteered at the shelter where John had been helped, spending time with the residents and listening to their stories. One day, as she was helping serve meals at the shelter, she noticed a man sitting alone in the corner. He looked sad and lost, much like John had that night in the alley. She walked over to him, holding out a plate of food. "Here you go," she said with a smile. "I hope you like it." The man looked up, surprised by her kindness. "Thank you," he said softly, taking the plate. "You're a very kind young lady." The little girl smiled. "I just want to help. Everyone deserves to feel cared for." The man nodded, a small smile forming on his face. "You're right. And you've made my day a little brighter." The little girl's actions continued to inspire those around her, but she never sought recognition or praise. To her, kindness was simply a way of life. Her mother often reminded her that the most important thing was to stay true to herself and to always act from the heart. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, watching the sunset, the little girl turned to her mother. "Mom, do you think the world could ever be completely kind?" Her mother thought for a moment, then smiled. "I think the world can be a kinder place if we all do our part. It starts with small acts, like the ones you do every day. And when we all work together, we can make a big difference." The little girl nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "Then I'm going to keep being kind, no matter what." Her mother hugged her tightly, feeling a deep sense of pride. "And that's why you're my hero." As the months passed, the little girl's kindness continued to ripple through the community, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. Her school's Kindness Matters initiative had grown into a movement, with students from other schools joining in. Local businesses sponsored kindness projects, and the town became known for its spirit of generosity and compassion. One day, the little girl's teacher announced a special project. "We're going to create a kindness wall in the school hallway," she explained. "Every time someone does something kind, they can write it on a paper heart and add it to the wall. By the end of the year, we'll have a wall full of love and kindness." The little girl loved the idea. She was one of the first to add a heart to the wall, writing, "I shared my lunch with a friend who forgot theirs." Soon, the wall was filled with colorful hearts, each one representing an act of kindness. Students would stop to read them, smiling as they saw how their small actions were making a difference. John, too, was thriving. His carpentry business had grown, and he had finally saved enough money to open his own small workshop. He named it Second Chances, as a reminder of the new life he had been given. His daughter helped him run the business, and together they created beautiful, handmade furniture that was in high demand. One day, as they were working on a new design, John's daughter turned to him. "Dad, do you think we could do something to give back? Maybe teach carpentry to people who are struggling, like you were?" John smiled, touched by her suggestion. "That's a wonderful idea. We could offer free workshops and help people learn a skill that could change their lives." They started planning immediately, and soon, Second Chances became more than just a business. It was a place of hope and opportunity. People from all walks of life came to learn carpentry, and many of them went on to start their own businesses or find stable jobs. The little girl's garden had also flourished. What had started as a small patch of vegetables had grown into a community garden, with neighbors coming together to plant, tend, and harvest. The produce was donated to local food banks and shelters, providing fresh, healthy food to those in need. One sunny afternoon, the little girl was in the garden with her mother, pulling weeds and watering plants. A group of children from the neighborhood joined them, eager to help. As they worked, the little girl told them stories about the people who had been helped by the garden. "There was a man who came to the shelter last week," she said. "He told me he hadn't eaten a fresh vegetable in months. When he tasted the tomatoes we grew, he said it was the best thing he'd ever eaten." The children listened intently, their eyes wide with wonder. "That's so cool," one of them said. "I want to help grow food for people too." The little girl smiled. "You can. The more we work together, the more people we can help." The little girl's story had also reached beyond her town. A national magazine featured her in an article titled, "The Power of One Small Act," and she received letters from people all over the country, thanking her for inspiring them to be kinder. One letter, in particular, stood out. It was from a woman who had been struggling with depression. "Your story reminded me that there is still good in the world," she wrote. "I started doing small acts of kindness, like leaving notes of encouragement in library books, and it's helped me feel more connected to others. Thank you for showing me the way." The little girl's mother read the letter to her, tears in her eyes. "See how much of a difference you've made," she said. "Your kindness has touched people's lives in ways you can't even imagine." The little girl smiled, feeling a warm glow in her heart. "I just wanted to help," she said. "I didn't know it would go this far." As the year came to a close, the town held a special celebration to honor the little girl and all the people who had been inspired by her kindness. The kindness wall from her school was displayed in the town square, and people added their own hearts throughout the day. There were speeches, music, and even a parade, with the little girl riding in a decorated wagon, waving to the crowd. John and his daughter were there too, proudly displaying some of their carpentry work. They had made a special bench for the town square, engraved with the words, "Kindness is the seed from which hope grows." As the little girl stood on the stage, looking out at the smiling faces, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. She hadn't set out to change the world, she had simply followed her heart. But in doing so, she had shown everyone the power of kindness. Years passed, and the little girl grew into a young woman. Her childhood act of kindness had become a legend in her town, a story told and retold to inspire new generations. But for her, it was never about fame or recognition. It was about the simple belief that everyone deserved to be treated with compassion and respect. She had carried that belief with her throughout her life. In high school, she started a volunteer group that organized community cleanups and fundraisers for local charities. In college, she studied social work, determined to dedicate her life to helping others. And now, as a young professional, she worked at a non-profit organization that supported homeless families, providing them with resources and opportunities to rebuild their lives. One sunny afternoon, she returned to her hometown for a visit. As she walked through the familiar streets, she noticed how much had changed. and how much had stayed the same. The community garden she had started as a child was now a thriving green space, filled with flowers, vegetables, and people of all ages working together. The kindness wall from her school had been preserved and moved to the town's community center, where it continued to grow with new hearts added every day. She stopped by John's carpentry workshop, now a well-established business with a team of skilled craftsmen. John greeted her with a warm hug, his eyes twinkling with pride. "Look at you," he said, smiling. "You've grown into such an amazing person." She laughed, shaking her head. "I'm just doing what feels right, like I always have." John's daughter, now a successful architect, joined them, and the three of them sat together, reminiscing about the past and sharing their hopes for the future. "You know," John said, his voice filled with emotion, "none of this would have happened if it weren't for you. You changed my life, and you've changed so many others." She smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. We all changed each other's lives. That's the power of kindness, it comes back to you in ways you never expect. Later that day, she visited her old school, where a new generation of students was carrying on the Kindness Matters initiative. The teacher who had once guided her was now the principal, and she welcomed her former student with open arms. "Look at you," the principal said, her eyes shining with pride. "You've become everything I knew you could be." The young woman smiled, feeling a swell of emotion. "I had a great teacher," she said. "And a community that believed in me." The principal led her to the school's auditorium, where a group of students was preparing for a kindness-themed play. As she watched them rehearse, she felt a sense of hope for the future. These children, like her, understood the importance of compassion and were determined to make the world a better place. One of the students, a little girl with pigtails and a bright smile, approached her. "Are you the girl from the story?" she asked, her eyes wide with wonder. The young woman knelt down to her level, smiling. "Yes, I am. And you know what? You can be a kindness hero too. All it takes is one small act." The little girl nodded, her face lighting up with determination. "I'm going to help people, just like you did." As the sun set, the young woman walked to the town square, where the bench John had made years ago still stood. She sat down, running her fingers over the engraved words, "Kindness is the seed from which hope grows." She thought about all the lives that had been touched by kindness, her own, John's, his daughter's, and countless others. She thought about the people she had helped through her work, the children she had inspired, and the community that had come together to create a brighter future. And she realized that kindness wasn't just a single act, it was a way of life. It was about seeing the humanity in everyone, even when it was hard. It was about lifting others up, even when you were struggling yourself. And it was about believing that, no matter how dark the world might seem, there was always hope. As she sat there, a young couple walked by, holding hands and laughing. A group of children played nearby, their laughter echoing through the square. And an elderly man sat on a bench, feeding breadcrumbs to the pigeons. The young woman smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. The world wasn't perfect, but it was full of beauty and goodness. And as long as there were people who cared, who reached out to others with kindness and compassion, there would always be hope.